So we're going to be taking a look at the book, really the letter of Third John. If you want to flip there, if you want to get there, we're going to be in Third John. Uh, but as we get going, the reason that we're going to be there today is that, um, as Corey was saying earlier, we are doing a marriage seminar relationship thing at the end of the month, and so we wanted to take some time to cover a little bit more of that topic. We wanted to be able to spend some more time talking about um, relationships, but not just like marriage relationships. I, I want you to understand the importance of how we interact and relate to other people, the importance of how we spend time with other people, who we are spending our time with, those kinds of things. And so, it, really, it's a difficult thing to try to talk about relationships. One, because you can ask Laura, I'm not great at it. I'm not a I'm not a very relatable person. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry you have to deal with me. I know Corey. He has to deal with me on a daily basis, just like Laura. And so they both kind of get a little bit better idea of who I am. But talking about relationship, um, it's difficult to know where to start because it has so much to do. I mean, really, the entire book, the entire Bible, our faith system has to do with relationship, right? From cover to cover. I mean, at the beginning in Genesis, it's God's relationship with Adam and Eve, and all the way down to the end in Revelation, it's talking about God's victory and so how he can restore a relationship with us. And so it's not necessarily a lack of things to talk about in Scripture. It is more, where do you even pick from? How do you simplify this whole thing down into something that is easily grasped or easily talked about in 30 minutes on a Sunday? And so I wanted to focus on 3 John because if you haven't looked at it yet, it's the shortest letter in the Bible. And so it gives us a good example to start from. But before we get into that, I just wanted to think about what is it that Jesus himself would have said or simplified this down to. And again, it's something we've talked about. It's something that I hope is familiar to you. But Jesus, when he was asked about what is the most important thing about the law, he said, well, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. He said that all of the Old Testament, the law, the prophets, everything could be boiled down to those two commandments, those two things: to love God with everything, with all of who you are, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So that's kind of like the overarching theme that I have for today, and we'll refer back to that here and there, but to kind of narrow it down to not just the entire topic of relationship, but what is something specific that we as a group, as a church, can really use and talk about that has to do with loving God with all of who we are and loving our neighbor as ourself? And the thing that kept coming up was hospitality. I mean, it seems like a silly subject, maybe. It seems like a pretty simple subject, but it's referred to several times within both Old Testament and New Testament. I mean, the difficult part about hospitality is that First Peter says that we should offer hospitality without grumbling. We should be willing to open up our homes to other people without complaining about it or feeling put out by it, right? That's something that's difficult. But I wanted to talk about hospitality because everything about our faith in God, our faith in Jesus, boils down to relationship. I mean, how do you talk about faith and make it simple? When who we are, our salvation, our place in the world, our reason for existence, our connection to God, everything is based on a relationship. Based on a relationship with Jesus and with God. And as created beings, as people who have been created by a God who is himself community, then he has made us to not just like a few people, but he has made us so that we are people who live in, who thrive in community. And the best way to talk about thriving in community is in hospitality. So 3 John, and again, we're going to read the entire book, and I know you're all worried about that, but it's 14 verses. I think we can handle it. But John is writing a letter to his friend Gaius. So if you haven't flipped there, 3 John, starting in the first verse, his letter goes like this. The elder, to my dear friend Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. It gave me great joy when some believers came and testified about your faith, your faithfulness to the truth, telling how you continue to walk in it. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Dear friend, you are faithful in what you are doing for the brothers and sisters, even though they are strangers to you. They have told the church about your love. Please send them on their way in a manner that honors God. It was for the sake of the name that they went out, receiving no help from the pagans. We ought, therefore, to show hospitality to such people so that we may work together for the truth. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. So when I come, I will call attention to what he is doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. He also stops those who want to do so and puts them out of the church. Dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. Demetrius is well spoken of by everyone, and even by the truth itself. We also speak well of him, and you know that our testimony is true. I have much to write to you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace to you. The friends here send their greetings. Greet the friends by name. Hospitality is something that maybe we don't really appreciate until it's been offered to you. When Laura and I moved to Tennessee, neither of us had ever really been west of the further east than the Oregon-California borders, right? We both lived on the West Coast. Never been I'd been to Idaho. We lived in Idaho for a few years, but if you know, I lived in Payette, Idaho. And if you know where that is, it's literally the border between Oregon and Idaho. And so I hadn't really been anywhere to the eastern United States, and neither had Laura. And we were moving, just been married, 3 months, 6 months, something like that. So that was a bright idea on my part. But I was going to go to school in Tennessee. And so we moved not halfway across the country, all the way across the country to Tennessee. And if any of you have ever made a move like that, I know, Trevor, you have, any of you other people, it is difficult to make a move like that. It is scary, it is daunting, because you are going to a place where you don't know anybody, at least maybe not many people. The nice thing about when Laura and I moved there was that my mom was actually born in Johnson City, Tennessee, where we were moving to. Her family had lived there. Her dad had been a professor at the school I was going to go to. And so my mom went with us, and not that she was going to know anything because the town had changed in a few years. But not only was my mom going with us, but my aunt and uncle, who lived in North Carolina at the time, came over from Raleigh and stayed a few days in Johnson City, Tennessee with us. And it was nice to feel safe, right? Because my mom and my uncle and aunt and uncle, they took us to church and they introduced us to people at the church that they used to go to when they were kids. There were still people there that were a part of the church when they were there. They introduced us to other friends that they knew. They showed us around town. It was a welcoming, just a great sense of safety, of peace, because when we went to a place that we didn't know anything about, we didn't know anyone there, we didn't know what was going on, we were taking a step of faith, somebody was there to show us the ropes, to make us feel welcome. Have you ever been in a place like that? Have you ever had to step out of your comfort zone and go somewhere that you don't know anyone, you don't know the town, you don't know the customs, you don't know what's supposed to be going on? And it is a great comfort to have someone to say, I'll show you around. I also went to 4 high schools in 3 years of high school. I had 4 different schools within my first 3 years of high school. And let me tell you, when you go to a new school, it is nice to have somebody to show you around. You get to the point where you maybe don't want to make friends because you don't know if you're going to see anybody again, but to try to find a way around 4 different schools, and you start to try to find one classroom, but you remember that you're following the plan of the school you were at last year or a few months ago instead of the school you're at now. To have somebody to show you the ropes, it's important. I hope maybe you have had somebody like that you can relate to. But that's what's going on in this letter. That's what I want to talk about this morning, is that John is writing to churches in what we call Asia Minor, Turkey, right? He's writing to these churches just kind of in general, but he's writing to a friend, Gaius, and he is sending this letter with a guy named Demetrius, right? And Gaius has been a leader in the church. He's doing well. He's loving people. But there is a problem with this other guy. And, I don't even want to pronounce his name, not only because he's mean, but he just has a weird name, Diotrephes. This guy is causing problems because the way the church worked, this is a young church, right? This is a very new thing. I mean, they're still getting their legs under them, trying to figure out what to do. And the way the church had been working up until this point, and for probably a good portion of time after this, was that they relied on the teaching of the apostles, right? This is still at least close enough to the time where John is still alive, and they needed people to teach them about Jesus. And what better person to teach you about Jesus than somebody who actually spent time with him, who knew him, who heard him talk? And so the apostles would send out people who had spent time with them. They would send out people who they had been able to teach, and they could carry letters that they had written. The apostles were sending out people that they knew and had shared the message of Jesus with to these other churches. And so they were supposed to welcome them in order to gain the teaching that the apostles were giving, right? That was the purpose. That was how the gospel was spread, was that people who were actual eyewitnesses, or at least secondhand witnesses, were going out and telling people about this. But John is running into a problem where there's somebody that is not wanting to welcome those people in. He's not wanting to let those people in. See, and hospitality for them was maybe something different than us. Growing up, did any of you guys like going to hotels? Did you guys like to stay in hotels? Maybe you didn't, I don't know. But for me, it was always exciting. It was always an adventure when we got to go to somewhere else and stay in a hotel. And really the main reason why was because growing up, I didn't have a pool, but hotels did. And so when I got to go stay somewhere else, there was always that chance that I could go swimming, and not just swimming, but swimming in a heated pool indoors. It didn't matter if it was raining, didn't matter if there was storms or it was sunny. Mom could not come up with any reason why I shouldn't be able to go swimming. And it was exciting to be able, I know, I was a little kid, I was dumb, I was entertained by easy things, but it was always fun to be able to ride the elevator. It was fun to be able to stay on a floor that was higher than the ground level. It was fun to be, this was a big one. It was fun to have a TV in the room. Because when I was a kid, that wasn't a thing. Like, I think everybody has a TV in every room nowadays. At least a lot of people do. But when I was a kid, you didn't have that. And so it was amazing to be able to go, and I could lay in bed and watch TV when I went to a hotel. But probably the greatest thing about staying in a hotel was that it was somebody else's problem to clean up. It was an adventure. And whether you like staying in hotels or in different places, I mean, most people stay in Airbnbs now. I don't know. But it was exciting. It was worthwhile. It was fun. But that is not the idea that these people had about traveling and staying in an inn. For these people, in Greek culture, in Roman culture, in Jewish culture at this time, if you stayed at an inn, you were not a very good person. Inns were associated, think about this. Think about an inn being kind of like an Old West saloon, only dirtier. It was associated with prostitution, with drinking, with gambling. It was known as, people thought that they were just flea infested. They were awful places. They were awful places. And not only that, but Plato, in one of his works, actually compared innkeepers to pirates because they would hold you captive until you paid them for the ability to stay the night. They didn't think that that was a good thing. It wasn't some kind of great commercial business where, hey, we'll provide a place for you for a nominal fee. It was, if you have to pay to stay somewhere, you don't have friends. That's the thing. Hospitality to them was a major role because if you were going to travel, you needed to know somebody. Corey, a couple of weeks ago, talked about how it's not what you know, it's who you know. And to them, that was incredibly important because you either need to stay with a friend or a family if you are traveling. And if you didn't know somebody there, then you had to find somebody who did know someone there. You had to find a friend of a friend. And then when you showed up, you could bring a letter or some kind of token to show, hey, I know the same person you do. I'm trustworthy. We can stay together and it's okay. And it was important for them to offer this because it was reciprocity, right? If I open up my home, then people are going to open up their homes when I travel. People didn't stay in hotels. They didn't stay in inns. They were not highly looked upon. And so the fact that there is somebody in this area that is denying people to come and stay with them was a big deal. It was a huge deal. You're not showing, it's not just Christian love, you're just not showing any kind of respect in any culture at the time if you're kicking people, not letting them come in and stay. So John is talking about hospitality. He's talking about encouraging the church to show Christian love, to show Christian hospitality to these people, to welcome them in. So, the church was highly missional, and it was dependent on this. It was dependent on people being able to go and stay, be fed by the church that was in the area, by friends and family that were already there. And so when these people are denying them common courtesy, when they're denying them hospitality, they're denying the gospel. They were denying the spread of the truth about who Jesus was. So, let's talk about what hospitality means. What does John tell us that we need to be looking for or doing? What is it that is important about hospitality? And so let's go back to that first thing we were talking about again, about Jesus saying that the two most important things are loving God with all of who you are and loving your neighbor as yourself. So I want to focus on that second part, loving your neighbor as yourself. One of the things that I think that we need to be reminded of and we need to work on is actually loving our neighbor as ourselves, because that means that we need to love the people around us no less than ourselves and no more than ourselves. And I know that sounds like a pretty simple thing, but we really need to stop and look at who we are treating and how we are treating them, right? Are we elevating certain people? Are we showing partiality? Because that was something that the New Testament really focused on was, do we show partiality to people? Are we giving special treatment to those who are wealthier was one of the biggest things in the New Testament, right? Are those who are wealthy being given special treatment? And are those who are not wealthy being given no treatment at all? Are they just being kind of shunted to the side? Are you showing partiality because of their economic status or because of their governmental status? Are you showing people partiality based on anything other than that they are a believer in Jesus? But we're not called to do that. We're not called to label people like that. We are not supposed to be showing partiality. And here's where it meets the rubber meets the road for us. When you take a look at our culture today, when you take a look at our world, the way America works, I don't know how the world works outside of the United States. I have not spent much time there, and I'm sorry. But when you look at the way we work in the United States, there is something that is counter-biblical going on. Because what is being done today is that people are saying, well, this group is small, it's marginalized. This group is this group has been beat down by others. And so therefore we must not only lift it up, but it must be lifted up at the cost of everybody else. We're going to take whoever is poor, whoever is, their sexual orientation, their race, which is something that is made up by us, by the way, race. They take all of those categories and they say, well, they've been marginalized, they've been not treated, not given partiality, and so what we're going to do is throw all the partiality at them at the expense of everyone else. But what the scripture says is we should not be treating people unequally because of those things. What today's culture does in the United States is it says that we don't care about if people are equal, we care about if outcomes are equal. So whatever we have to do to other people in order to make sure that outcomes are equal, it's fine. It's fair game. But what Jesus says is that we need to treat all people equally no matter the outcome. Why? Because when we treat other people equally, when we treat other people as if they are truly a creation of God, if we treat people as if we are the same, then the outcomes won't make a difference, at least not as big of a difference. The outcome will be that we are all taken care of because we are loved by Jesus, and what matters is not our earthly circumstances, but that we are a part of the kingdom. Jesus says that we are to focus on creating equality among people and not trying to put other people down in order to raise others up. Not showing partiality to one or the other, but showing Christian love to all. The next thing about showing hospitality to our neighbor is that Christian hospitality cares for both the physical and it cares for the spiritual needs of those we are welcoming in. John, in his letter, he says that I pray that you may enjoy good health and that it may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. And then the rest of this is talking about how he is hoping that the actions that they take will have spiritual impacts. He's telling Gaius that he wants to make sure that both physical people are being met and their spiritual needs are being taken care of as well. Peter also talks about this. In 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 7 through 11, he says, "The end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. Above all, love each other deeply because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ." What Peter is talking about is not that love makes sin disappear, or that it's like love is like a blanket that we throw over sin and then we don't see it, so it's not a big deal. It's that when we love each other, then those sins start to disappear in that we don't commit them, or we don't commit them as much because we understand that there are people holding us accountable and helping us, and that we are helping others. It's the idea that we are starting to actually fix the problem rather than just trying to mask the symptoms. He says that when we offer hospitality, it is for the purpose of making sure that we are growing spiritually as well, so that in all things, God might be praised. So, Christian hospitality, it is something that doesn't show partiality. It is something that that is seeking to meet the needs of both the physical and the spiritual needs of the person. And then Christian hospitality, it also corrects. It corrects when it is needed. So, in this whole thing, John is trying to address the problem of somebody who is making a mistake. He's not living the way Jesus called him to. And we don't know if this guy was actually the leader of one of the house churches. We don't know if he was just a prominent person. We don't know. We're not given much detail. We just know that in some way, somehow, he is exerting authority over a church so that even if other people within the congregation are offering hospitality to someone, he tries to kick them out. And so John says, I will call attention to what he is doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. He says that when he comes, he will take care of this, right? When he gets there, he's hoping to get there in person and be able to talk to this man face to face and call attention to this, to point out the wrong, right? He wants to be able to solve the problem, and not just so that he can. Sometimes I think that we like to try to rebuke people. That's a good church word, right? We want to rebuke someone of their sin. But sometimes I think that we want to do that just so that we can, be mean, I guess. We want to do that because we like to point out somebody else's wrongs or flaws. But what is needed here is that whole idea of speaking the truth in love, right? This whole letter, if you listen to what John says, he keeps talking about love. He keeps talking about love over and over and over again. He is not saying that this guy is just some jerk. He's saying, look, this person is preventing the gospel, and we need to not just make sure that the gospel can be preached, but we need to restore him so that he isn't left out. We need to make sure that he is corrected. And that's what we need to do with Christian hospitality, is that when people are in our lives, when they are a part of what we're doing, when we have welcomed people in, that we correct them, not just so that we can show that we're much smarter or better, but so that they can be corrected and be restored to the right relationship. That's what John seeks to do here, and that's what we should seek to do. For us, hospitality is not just welcoming people into our home. For us, hospitality is not just saying, my door is open, you can come in, you can crash on my couch. But it's welcoming people into our lives. It's welcoming people into who we are and what we do. It's welcoming people into all the different things that go on in our days, in our weeks, our months. It is allowing people to be a part of who we are. Right? That's what Christian hospitality is supposed to be about. Speaking the truth in love, making sure that people are taken care of physically and spiritually, making sure that people are not shown partiality, but that all people are treated equally. See, in all of this, I think we can say that Christian hospitality doesn't seek to be first. And that was this guy's problem. That was, like I said, Diotrephes. That was his problem, was John says he wants to be first. But what did Jesus say about being first? First shall be last. We should be seeking to serve others. It doesn't seek to be first. It doesn't seek to put ourselves in power or position. It doesn't seek to have other people love us because we're amazing. It just seeks to take care of people. And we do that by welcoming people into our lives. We serve them by letting them be a part of what's going on. And that's where we have to be a little bit little bit careful. Because we have to stop and ask ourselves the question, who are we letting into our lives? Who are we letting be a part of us? And I don't mean that in a weird way. I mean, like, when we actually bring somebody into our home, are we being an influence on them, or are they being an influence on us? What are we thinking about? The people, the things, the ideas? Are we thinking about the stuff that we are welcoming into our lives? Jesus, in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 24, he's talking to the Pharisees, Sadducees, they're always questioning him. And he says this: when an impure spirit comes out of a person, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to the house I left. When it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of that person is worse than the first. That is how it will be with this wicked generation. Not just Jesus' generation, but with our generation. There are people who, it seems like they've got their house in order, like they have prepared everything. Jesus is talking about how people around him in his day, they're ready to get rid of an evil spirit in their lives, and then they take care of making sure that they're doing all kinds of right things, right? This is the kind of person that would go to the synagogue and offer the right sacrifices and do all those things. And it seems like they're putting their house in order, making sure that they are ready. But then the problem is that they don't actually let God back in. People are getting their houses ready to welcome guests in, but instead of letting God back in, or the right kinds of the people that will hold them accountable, the kind of people that will encourage them in their faith, they haven't let them back in. They've let that evil spirit come back in. They've made everything hospitable, but instead of welcoming in somebody who will be an encouragement in their faith, an encouragement in their life, they've let something in that just makes things even worse than they were before. So what I'm getting at is that I want you to think about, we are really good at making sure that the house is cleaned up. And it's not just about making sure that it's full, making sure that there's something there. We have to make sure that what we are welcoming into our homes, into our lives, into our minds and our hearts are the things that are good for us. The things that are going to lift us up, encourage us, make sure that we are following Jesus, and not the kinds of things that are going to eventually pull us down. We can be just as hospitable to bad things as we can to good things. And that's the problem, is that most of the time we like to be hospitable to bad things, to the things that are making us worse off. That's what we have to be careful of. What kinds of friends, co-workers, and I'm not trying to make you leave your other friendships. I'm trying to say that when we are interacting with people who are non-Christians, are we letting them into our homes, or are we helping them welcome Jesus into theirs? Are we making sure that they are taking in the things that will help them, or are we taking in the things that are going to change us in a negative way? So hospitality towards neighbors, it's important. It's how we interact with other people who God has created. But I want to go back to that statement again about loving God with all of who you are and loving our neighbor as ourselves. Let's talk about that loving God part right quick. How do you show hospitality to God? I don't know, maybe to you it's a little difficult to think about being hospitable to God. It seems kind of weird that God would want or need us to open up our homes to him. But have you ever stopped and thought about how many times that is what God asks for? In Genesis chapter 18, when God has called Abraham, and it's a part of that whole journey, right, to be the kind of person that God has called Abraham to be. But just before Sodom and Gomorrah, these visitors show up just outside of Abraham's tent. Abraham sees these guys, and it says that the Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham, not knowing that God is showing up, sees 3 visitors, and what does he do? He rushes out and he says, please come stay with me. I will give you water and food. Just rest here. Stay here. And in doing so, because Abraham was willing to do that, he showed hospitality to God and was able to meet and talk with God's representative. In Hebrews, the author of Hebrews in chapter 13 says that we should seek to offer hospitality because by doing so, offering hospitality to strangers, that we have shown hospitality to angels without even knowing it. Or how about in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus says when he's talking about the end, and he's talking about how God is going to separate those who have followed him and those who have not. And he says this, he says, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Indeed, I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. The righteous will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or need clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Jesus is saying that, look, when we are willing to open up our lives and take care of strangers, when we are willing to take care of people, offer them hospitality, we are not just doing that for them, but we're doing that for God. John tells us that we're supposed to be imitators of good. He says that don't imitate evil, but imitate what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. If we're going to imitate what is good, that means that we have to be around good. It means that we have to be around God. It means that we have to be in his presence and seeing what he's doing. If we're going to imitate how he acts, we have to see how he does it. So, John is telling us that we need to invite God in. We need to open up our homes and our lives and welcome him into what is going on. And the crazy thing is that God doesn't force his way in. God doesn't come with a battering ram and beat down the door and say, look, I'm staying here whether you like it or not. He says, I stand at the door knocking. He waits for us to open the door. He won't break it down. Just says, can I come in? Is he welcome in our homes? Are we showing God hospitality in our lives? And I know that might not seem like a big deal. It might seem like an obvious answer. Of course, I love to have God in my house. I love to have God in my life. But is God welcome in our schools? Is God welcome at our jobs? Is God welcome in our politics, in our communities? Is God welcome on our news? Is he welcome on our TV shows or on the radio that we listen to? Is God welcome in all of the aspects of our lives? Because you know what? We're really starting to see the effects of when he is not welcome. He's not welcome in our schools, and our education system is plummeting, and we're seeing school shootings, and we're seeing all kinds of awful things happening to where we're supposed to send our kids. Is he welcome in all kinds of things? I know we all know that God is not welcome in politics. So we'll just assume take that one for granted. God is not welcome there anymore, at least by most people. And those are the big obvious ones, but is God welcome in the things that we look at on our computers and our tablets? Is he welcome in the things that we listen to? Is he welcome in the TV programs we watch? Is he welcome in all of the aspects of our lives? Sometimes I think that we welcome God in and we say, this is your room, please stay here. You're not welcome in the rest of the house. God, I'd love for you to come in and stay, but you are relegated to the backyard. Please do not step foot anywhere outside of there. But God needs to be welcome in all of our lives. Remember that when we welcome somebody in, it's not just welcoming them into a home, but we are welcoming him into us, our whole lives. Is he welcome in every aspect? If we are going to love God with all of who we are, we can't just love him with a part of us. Is he welcome everywhere? Is he welcome everywhere in your life? Is he welcome in your church? I mean, that might seem like a really stupid question to ask, but when you look at the church today, there are a number of churches. There are plenty of people who they have not welcomed God into their church, and it shows. What they've welcomed is cultural values. What they have welcomed in is whatever is popular. They've welcomed in whatever the mass screams and shouts. But when it comes to actually welcoming him, what God says, who God is he actually able to come into the church? You'll find the door closed. My challenge for you today is that we are welcoming our neighbors in and that we are welcoming God in, and not just into a part, but when we welcome them in, are they able to go to the whole house? Where do you let him in?